Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Lance Lohman, and I'm the proud superintendent of the Longwood Central School District. I'd like to welcome you all to the 18th Annual Legislative Workshop, and thank you for joining us for this important annual opportunity to partner together to advocate for public education. I want to extend our sincere thanks to Eastern Suffolk BOCES and Suffolk Region PTA for their ongoing support for this event each and every year. At this time, I'd like to ask that we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in recognizing the members of the Longwood Board of Education that are here with us today. Board of Education President, Dr. Rhonda Stitham, Board of Education Vice President, Ms. Victoria Malloy, Board of Education members, Mr. Daniel Tomaszewski, Mr. Paul Franco, Ms. Penelope Blizzard McGrath, Mr. William Macian, and Ms. Christina Brown. Please also welcome the members of the Eastern Suffolk BOCES Board joining us today. Linda Goldsmith, William Shang, Fred Langstaff, Susan Lippman, Anna Mackesy, James McKenna, Catherine Romano, Robert Sweeney, John Weishi, and Eastern Suffolk BOCES District Superintendent, David Wicks. We also appreciate our continued partnership with Suffolk Region PTA and extend a thank you to Region Director Lori Fontana for joining us here today. Well, these past 2 years have most definitely shown us the importance of our collective advocacy efforts and the partnerships we all have with our local elected officials. We have and will continue to demonstrate that true collaboration and understanding leads to meaningful change for our students, our schools, and the communities that they serve. Although we have each endured many challenges and firsts over the past 24 months, coupled with ever-changing guidance, confusion, loss, and frustration, we have continued to find a way to keep our students in school safe and thriving, no matter the obstacle that has crossed our paths. I believe that there is no coincidence that our nation's greatest generation was shaped through the hard times and difficulty with which they were faced and characterized by the grit and tenacity that they developed along the way. It's no wonder that our students remain resilient and continue to succeed both inside and outside the classroom. I'm truly honored to be here today, and I thank each and every one of our nearly 250 participants representing 35 different school districts across the county for joining us here today. Your ongoing commitment to making this legislative workshop a priority each year, now in its 18th year, gives us the continual opportunity to renew our commitment to students, staff, teachers, families, and school communities as we unite to collectively address the ongoing challenges with which we are faced. This year, we come together to partner with our elected officials toward developing a common understanding of what our school communities need to recover from this pandemic. This year, we are proud to welcome Mr. Bob Schneider, Executive Director of the New York State School Boards Association, for the first time to our legislative advocacy event. Bob has served as the New York State School Board Association Director since January 1st, 2020. Before his appointment, Bob was the Associate Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer since August 2014 and served as the Director of Finance for 15 years. He is a member of the National School Board Association's Finance Committee, Organization of State Association Executive Directors, served as Treasurer of Junior Achievement for Northeastern New York, and served in their executive committee. Bob has also been awarded the Distinguished Member of the Year Award by Empire State Society of Association. Please join us in welcoming Bob, who will present on the state budget and legislative priorities for this year.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to join you at your virtual breakfast table today. Once again, I missed the opportunity to be with you in person, but I am optimistic that we'll soon be together again for real, and I will be enjoying some of your fine Long Island hospitality. In the meantime, I'm grateful for this technology that enables us to stay in touch more conveniently and sometimes even more frequently than we could meet in person as the COVID-19 pandemic has stretched on. NYSSBA's immediate past president, Long Island's very own Fred Langstaff of Eastern Suffolk BOCES, can tell you what a lifeline virtual platforms like Zoom have been for us during the past 2 years. Fred and I and other members of our board of directors were able to check in regularly with each other to share information and updates and still protect our safety, particularly in those days before the COVID vaccines were available. As we peruse the governor's proposed state budget for 2022 and 2023 and map out our advocacy plans for the coming months, we at NYSSBA have identified many areas that we believe will be worth watching for school districts. Our advocacy team has developed a range of resources, most of which you will find on our website, www.nyssba.org, to help you plan your communications and meetings with your representatives. First, let me review a few of the budget high points. We are thoroughly pleased that the governor has proposed funding for the second year of a 3-year phase-in of the long-awaited foundation aid formula. What a difference a year makes, basically. The $1.6 billion increase statewide, it's huge and has been a long time coming. The foundation aid formula was supposed to put New York on a path to truly fair funding more than a dozen years ago, about 15 actually, but who's counting? Some of the students that are going to be asking questions today were toddlers when the foundation aid formula was changed. So we need change in that formula. The foundation aid formula was designed to help local school districts cope with real world challenges in local school districts. These challenges include serving students with disabilities and students with other special needs, educating English language learners, and addressing the needs of students living in poverty. We also are very pleased that the governor's budget calls for foundation aid increases at least 3% for all districts. That minimum aid increase helps to ensure that districts can cope with rising costs. We support the proposed new RECOVS funding, $100 million over 2 years to address mental health issues and the lost learning opportunities that resulted from the pandemic. This money can help districts hire mental health professionals, expand school mental health programs, and address learning gaps that widened during the pandemic. We also are very happy to see a proposal for $2 million in grants to support school district initiatives to improve school climate. Supporting mental health, a healthy school social climate, and tools to help students recover academically are all among our highest priorities right now. I like the forward-looking tone this budget offers. It's my hope that it will enable us to look down the road and plan more for the future, rather than constantly reacting to whatever curveball has just come in our direction. I think we're all sick of that. That said, we have a few ideas that we believe will put school districts in an even stronger position to cope with whatever comes next. On the foundation aid formula, we believe this is the time to start planning for an update. As good as it is, the formula now operates on data about poverty, populations, and regional costs and more that is as much as 20 years old. 20 years old, that is incredible. Now's the time to look to the future of the formula and consider many changes to the education environment that have occurred since the formula was designed. I see that you have included a proposal to make free school meals a permanent offering in your discussion plan today. Kudos to you for zeroing in on such an important and powerful issue. If you haven't already seen it, I want to mention an excellent discussion paper that NYSSBA, the PTA, and other members of the State Educational Conference Board put out this month. It recommends universal free school meals in New York. The paper also recommends steps to expand the reach of existing state and federal school meal programs, streamlining the eligibility process for students while also reducing costs for school districts. Hunger can be a real and significant barrier to learning and social growth. Thank you for putting this issue on your agenda today. Other financial proposals that are on our radar to endorse or nudge toward expansion include increase the aidable cap for BOCES career and technical education teacher salaries. These are among the most valuable educational services we can offer. CTE offers many students a pathway to rewarding careers. but the aidable salary cap for BOCES CTE instructors has not changed in almost 30 years. Again, we need to look at that. It's too much time has passed. Raising this cap would help make teaching a more attractive option for CTE professionals and also make CTE programming a more affordable option for school district. We also need to address unintended consequences of the property tax cap. The allowable growth should be at least 2%. Misunderstandings about what the cap is and how it is calculated persist. Prohibit negative tax caps. School districts should not need supermajority approval for budgets that do not raise taxes, provide only modest increases, or even cut taxes. We need to raise the fund balance limit for school districts. A 4% limit is too restrictive and prevents school districts from enacting responsible safeguards to protect against the impact of economic downturns, unexpected costs, or shortfalls in revenue. School districts deserve flexibility that allows them to be responsible and prudent and is closer to the flexibility of other local governments have. We need to expand efforts to address staff shortages in school districts, including bus drivers, teachers, and in other positions. The executive budget offers several welcome proposals, such as temporary teaching permits to be issued while formal certifications are in process, earnings cap waivers for retirees to come back to work for public schools without concerns about exceeding a cap on earnings and reducing their retirement benefits. We also applaud efforts to reduce carbon emissions from school buses and boost environmental sustainability in school buildings. We have these caveats. The transition to zero-emission school buses should be adequately funded. School districts should have access to funding to support investments in energy-efficient technology and other sustainability efforts. Since my topic this morning is state budget and our legislative priorities, and since we are enjoying the benefits of a virtual meeting venue right now, the topic of digital communication and remote learning is of utmost importance these days. NYSSBA fully supports a proposal in Governor Hochul's budget to expand broadband coverage through a new Connect All initiative. Broadband and digital equity is an important priority in all communities, and it requires statewide leadership and a comprehensive approach. Online courses can help all districts expand curriculum opportunities through collaboration with schools in other communities, or perhaps even other countries. Remote learning can help school districts cope with bus driver shortages, bad weather, like today, or other unexpected disruptions. The Connect All initiative would update and consolidate New York's approach to building broadband infrastructure, streamlining the process, and significantly boosting investment. NYSSBA is encouraging state leaders to also add to the initiative by bringing internet speed requirements in line with our actual 21st century needs. The current definition of high speed in New York is 100 megabits per second download and just 10 megabits per second upload. The current FCC standards are even slower, 25 megabits for download and 3 megabits for upload. Those speeds are far too short of what is needed when multiple members of a household are learning and working remotely. The state should define high-speed broadband as at least 100 megabits per second download and at least 100 megabits per second upload. Other things that we're looking at as far as our priorities here at NYSSBA are child safety zones. They play a crucial role in school safety. Child safety zones are designated areas within a school district in which students who live a short distance from the school building may receive transportation because walking could be too dangerous. NYSSBA has advocated for the expansion of this definition to include high crime areas and the presence of vacant and abandoned structures. This includes expanding zones to cover other foreseeably dangerous conditions and ensuring the capacity to transport students in child safety zones is appropriately reimbursable through transportation aid. Throughout the pandemic, school boards and other public bodies were able to continue their vital work virtually. This was essential in ensuring the success of our state's response to the emergency. Likewise, citizen participation was preserved through virtual means, allowing public involvement to continue. NYSSBA calls upon state leaders to make two specific changes to the open meetings law. School boards and all public bodies should be able, at local discretion, to meet virtually when the need arises. Statutes should be amended to no longer require school board members to publicly disclose their physical location and make the location open to the public. The state should examine expanding the number of regional high schools. In this model, students attend elementary and middle school in their local community, then attend a regionalized facility at the secondary level. NYSSBA calls on the state to provide flexibility to begin the academic year earlier than September 1st, if that is what district leaders choose is best for their students and communities. As the future of learning changes, both the school day and school year may look different from how it has looked in the past. School districts need the guidance and the flexibility to be able to adapt the needs of today and meet the needs of tomorrow. Current statute limits the commissioner's ability to change the date of school board elections. NYSSBA calls for legislative action to empower the Commissioner of Education to declare alternative election arrangements in case of a disaster disrupting a scheduled school board and budget vote. School districts in many communities are considering and adopting diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and practices. Many schools have faithfully implemented DEI efforts for years, and more have joined since the Board of Regents called on all schools in the state to develop policies that advance DEI as a priority. In some communities, debates have arisen over the intent and focus of these efforts. Now, to ensure outcomes that best serve our young people, debates must be resolved through a reliance on facts and on a true understanding of the work being done in our schools. The goal of DEI efforts is to create a positive learning environment for all students and eliminate barriers that limit a student's chance to be successful. When a school board adopts a DEI policy, it is committing to ensuring all students have equal educational opportunities and the resources they need to succeed. DEI policies and practices aim to include all groups that have been disadvantaged, whether due to race, ethnicity, disability, gender or gender identity, socioeconomic status, or another factor. That is why DEI efforts include a focus on advocating to ensure all schools have resources to match to the needs of the students they serve. We invite you to join us for a virtual lobby day focused on NYSSBA's 2022-2023 budget priorities. We will provide NYSSBA members with information and talking points for the meetings that you have scheduled with legislators. You can contact the Senate and Assembly member who represents your school district to schedule virtual meetings or reach out to your local school board association. Unsure your district state officials? Use your school district's office address in the final officials function in our advocacy, function on our advocacy page. The 2022 NYSSBA Virtual Lobby Day is coming up February 9th, 2022. Time is 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Also, the school board's role in curriculum adoption webinar. Questions about curriculum are not unprecedented or surprising. The term can mean different things to different individuals. To some, it might mean the courses that are taught in a school, to others, standards or what is taught in a classroom. In addition, there may be occasions in which determinations and or differences over curricular matters might necessitate a weighting of state, school district, parental, and student interests. Therefore, it is important that any conversation about curriculum start with a common understanding of the term, as well as the underpinnings that set the foundation for curriculum development and implementation in New York. This webinar offers information that can help to facilitate such understanding. As NYSSBA members and education stakeholders, you are invited to attend this webinar on February 10th from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Look for these items in my weekly message, which I send out on Sunday evening. So if you aren't registered, you can register for those events. And also there will be a helpful resource guide for you in regards to the curriculum webinar to help you understand how the school board's role in curriculum and communicating with your communities. Finally, I just wanted to show you this page. If you go to our website, you can get these archived resources on demand. There's a lot of information to help support you if your district so chooses to adopt or focus on a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative. We have plenty of things that you can look for as far as resources. In addition, we also have a resource there, a webinar on how to manage contentious school board meetings. Unfortunately, sometimes things can get lively, and we want to help our school board presidents, superintendents, and school boards make sure we hear from our communities, and we have a very practical and important discussion about the important things around public education and what the school board and the superintendent and his or her administrators are doing to advance all students. So with that, I want to thank you for your time today. I look forward to the conversation later with our legislators. And I do want to end with this. I really am so proud to be serving the school board members throughout this state and down on Long Island. We are working hard to change things. We know we've got to change that foundation aid formula. We know regional cost indexes are one of the factors we have to look at. We know there's a lot of things we need to update, but we see moving into this year, this legislative season, a very promising budget outlook, and we will work tirelessly on your behalf and also on your students and your community's behalf. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. We appreciate you being here, and we appreciate that comprehensive presentation. Next up this morning is someone that needs no introduction. We have Eastern Suffolk BOCES Chief Operating Officer, Dr. Julie Lutz. Dr. Lutz has spent 32 of her 37 years in education as part of Eastern Suffolk BOCES. She's the chairperson of the Legislative Committee for the Suffolk County School Superintendents Association and is a member of the Long Island Education Coalition, where she works to advocate for public education on Long Island. She's also very involved in policy research and development and committed as an advocate for data-driven, effective practices for maximizing student outcomes. Dr. Lutz has completed her administrative training at Stony Brook University. She has a PhD from Hofstra University and earned both her master's and bachelor degrees from SUNY Oswego. On a personal note, she's been a vital component of our legislative breakfast since 2014. And while we're truly saddened to think that this is her last year working with us, we look forward to hearing about her new adventures in retirement. Dr. Lutz, although I've only had the pleasure of working with you for a short period of time myself, I truly consider myself fortunate to have had the honor to call you my colleague. You are definitely a true leader, a role model, a class act in every sense of the word. And I know I speak for many across the island and across the state to say that you'll truly be missed. On behalf of our Board of Education, our central administration here in Longwood, our school community, thank you so much, not only for your dedication and support for the legislative workshop, but most importantly, for your tireless advocacy in support of all students across the island and New York State.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure, I have to tell you, as I reflected on this event. This is the 9th time I have presented at this event. It was the first presentation I did when I took over as Chief Operating Officer back in 2014. We have done a lot of different things over the years. I'm not sure what is more anxiety provoking, figuring out the technology or standing in front of several hundred people, but I am really glad to be here. Very, very thankful to Longwood Central School District and their commitment to advocacy for public education. Thankful to our relatively new partners, Suffolk Region PTA, and thankful for the over 200 participants who are here on a Saturday morning because they care about what happens in public education. Thank you also to New York State School Boards and Bob Schneider. We know school boards and school employees and school leaders and PTA are really important partners in this work. So let me share my screen. Okay, so I'm hoping you're all seeing what you need to be seeing. Topic for this morning, reshaping the future of public education. It is certainly a time in history when we need to think about the future of public education and how it looks different, because it has looked different for the last 2 years. An overview of the presentation this morning: of course, Long Island key demographic and need shifts. It is important for us to keep our eye on this information. Key facts related to student social emotional health, which are so much more important after what we've lived in and through in the last 2 years. Long Island student outcomes, the fiscal stressors, and of course the relief that we have felt from state budgets. We appreciate that. And then of course our legislative priorities, which I'm really happy to see and hear are very much in line with New York State school boards. So thank you again for that partnership. So let's jump into what it is Long Island looks like. We are a regional partnership, so we're going to take a look at not only Suffolk County, but quickly at some Nassau County numbers as well. This is a graph that shows the enrollment change in Suffolk County school districts. I know that some of the words are small, but as you know, we post this information for districts to use, and when you have it and can use it in your own spaces, you'll be able to see the districts and specifically how they're impacted. But this is the last 10-year enrollment change history for Suffolk County school districts. All of the bars over to the right are districts that have lost enrollment. All of the bars over to the left are districts that have gained enrollment. Anywhere, some of those shifts are as much as 3,000 students. So the demographics certainly in our enrollments look different. One of the things that's important to note this year is in Suffolk County over the last 10 years, we've seen a negative 12.1% shift in the enrollment, which is in line with the rest of the state at this point. This is Nassau County, similar trending. However, Nassau County has only seen a 5.3% shift in enrollment. I do want to say this is 2021 data. We're always a little bit behind on data because we use verified data when it comes out. So Nassau County also seeing a decrease, somewhat less than Suffolk and somewhat less than the state as a whole, which is at a little over 12%. But most importantly, you know, we take a look at a decrease in the number of students. Let's start taking a look at what do those students look like. So this is our economically disadvantaged students on Long Island. The blue line there is Long Island as a whole. The green line is Suffolk County, and the orange line is Nassau. And what we have seen since 2012-13, when we started collecting the economically disadvantaged numbers, we used to use free and reduced price lunch numbers, but we've shifted to economically disadvantaged numbers, is that we continue to see an increase in those students who are living in economically disadvantaged households. And across Suffolk County, we are between 40 and 45% at this point. This is what it looks like by district. Again, you can see all of the districts over to the left have had huge increases in the number of students that attend there that are economically disadvantaged. In fact, in Suffolk County, we've had over a 27% increase in the last 8 years. Long Island as a whole, also over 27% increase, where compared to the rest of the state, not including New York City, the increase has been 6.1%. So the rate of increase in economically disadvantaged students on Long Island is surpassing the rest of the state. This is what it looks like in Nassau County. Nassau County's increase is very similar to Suffolk County, and and the Long Island as a whole, 27% students. And these are different. This is a different picture than many people think of when they think of Long Island. And I think it's important not only for us to understand that, but for our elected officials and of course our Albany partners to understand that as well. This is what it looks like on a map for those of you who prefer a map visual instead of a graph. These are our school districts. The school districts that are in red are districts that have between 76 and 100% of their students that are classified as economically disadvantaged. The districts that are in dark green, between 51 and 75% of their students economically disadvantaged. And this was in 12-13. So when I shift to a more recent map, see how the red and the darker green and even the lighter green increase. So again, a reflection of what we saw in the graph. This is Nassau County. Very often Nassau County is thought of as, economically in a better place than Suffolk, and in many ways it is, but it doesn't mean that there are not pockets of intense poverty in Nassau County as well. In 12-13, you can see that they had districts that fell between a 51 and 75% of their students economically disadvantaged, and districts with almost all, between 3/4 and 100% of their students as economically disadvantaged. And this is what Nassau looks like in a more recent map with 2020-2021 data. So what is a key fact? According to federal guidelines, approximately 37.4% of the students enrolled in Long Island school districts qualify as economically disadvantaged. This is a really important number. It's an important thing for us to keep in mind. It's important for us to continue to message to our elected officials in Albany that that's a key demographic fact related to the students that we serve. So let's take a look at English language learners. These are New York State demographics, and these are the top districts in the state for the number of English language learners that they have. So not surprising, we see New York City there, we see the big 5 school districts there, but are people surprised to know that 4 of the top districts as far as number of English language learners fall on Long Island, and that is Brentwood, Hempstead, Central Islip, and Riverhead. When we take a look at districts that have 20% or more of their enrollment that are English language learners, all of the districts here that are highlighted in red are on Long Island, right? So there are some districts that have more than a 20% of L enrollment that are not on Long Island, but the vast majority of these districts are on Long Island, and you can see what they are. So let's take a look at what that trend looks like between 2010-11 and 2020-21. The blue bar is Long Island, or the blue line is Long Island. The green line is Suffolk County, and the red line is Nassau County. And the additional line that we've put on this graph is the rest of the state. So although we see really across the state and in both Long Island counties an increase in the percentage of English language learners, you see a faster or a quicker increase in that percentage in Long Island districts. Again, not something that many people think about when they think about Long Island, but an important demographic to keep in mind. This is what it looks like when we take a look at it by district. What you see, unlike some of our other districts where you had districts going up and some districts going down, the vast majority of districts in Suffolk County have seen an increase in the number of English language learners that have walked through their doors in the last 10 years. In fact, Suffolk County has seen a 66.6% increase. Long Island as a whole, 55.5% increase. And again, when you get this data, you can take a closer look for what that means for your particular district. This is what it looks like for Nassau County. Again, districts across Long Island seeing an increase in English language learners. The percent increase in Nassau County is 32.2%, somewhat lower than Suffolk County, but nonetheless high, and bringing the Long Island percent increase as an island to 55.5, which outpaces the rest of the state. As of October 2020, which is when we last had verified data of this, Long Island had 42,163 English language learners, which is 18.2% of the state's total English language learner population, including New York City. So let's take a look at our students with disabilities and how that has shifted from 12-13 to 2021. Again, you can see most of our districts have seen an increase in students with disabilities. Some of our districts have seen a decrease. The overall change in Suffolk County, 7.3%, whereas if you take a look at the percent change in students with disabilities in the rest of the state, it is 3.7%. Nassau County, similar. Nassau County has seen a 6% increase in their students with disabilities in the last 8 years, again, compared to the rest of the state at 3.7%. So let's take a look at changes in district wealth. So we spoke about changes in student or family wealth, but we've also seen changes in district wealth, which we measure by combined wealth ratio. For those of you who are not familiar, combined wealth ratio is determined by a combination of the incomes in the district, the income taxes paid in the district, as well as the land wealth in the district. So again, the red means here districts that fall below the state average. So these are our 11-12 numbers. This is Suffolk County. You see Western Suffolk districts and then Eastern Suffolk districts. And no, there is not a gap between those districts other than on this map. But districts that are shaded in red are districts, again, that fall below the state average in district wealth. So let's take a look at what it looks like 10 years later. Many more districts falling below the state average, and more districts that are also shaded in the darker green, which is districts that fall between a 1.0, one being the average, and a 1.499. So again, you can see decrease in the relative wealth of districts in Suffolk County in the last 10 years. Nassau County, similar. Even way back in 11-12, there were Nassau County districts that fall below the average in district wealth. Again, not something that people typically think about in Nassau County. You can see many districts in Nassau County also falling at the next wealth category, which is between 1 and 1.499. And if you take a look at Nassau more recently, many more districts falling below the state average here as well. So what does that mean by numbers? In Suffolk County, 61.4% of the students that are educated in Suffolk County attend districts that are of below average wealth. So almost 2/3 of the students. You see some differences between Eastern Suffolk districts and Western Suffolk districts. Almost 70% of students in Eastern Suffolk districts fall in districts of a below average wealth. In Western Suffolk, 45.5, and slightly less in Nassau County. However, Long Island as a whole, 50% of the students here are educated in districts of a below average wealth. Also something for us to keep in mind, and for us to be sure that we understand and message to our elected officials and for our Albany partners to understand as they begin to better understand Long Island and the needs that we have. Key fact, when we take a look at homelessness, 4,425 students enrolled in Long Island school districts experienced homelessness at any point in the school year. This is 2021 data. When we take a look at the rest of the state, excluding New York City, we are about half of what almost half of what the rest of the state was. So 9,677 students enrolled in districts in the rest of the state were homeless, and Long Island, again, almost half of that same number. This is 5.1% of the state's total homelessness population, and that is including New York City. New York State demographics, top homeless districts. This is not necessarily a list that you want to be on unless you're trying to demonstrate the needs of your students. So these are districts, again, from across the state that have the highest number of homeless students, and 5 of those districts are on Long Island: Hempstead, William Floyd, Uniondale, Brentwood, and Riverhead. Student social emotional health struggles have been intensified by the pandemic. If you are a student, if you have a student in your home, if you work in a school district or support a school district, this is not news to you. Let's take a look at why some of that is. The pandemic has resulted in changes in the routines of students, breaks in continuity of learning, breaks in continuity of healthcare, students who have missed well child and immunization visits, students who have limited access to mental health support, speech and occupational and health services and other supports that are available in schools. Students like all of us, right, who have missed significant life events, celebrations, vacation plans, milestone life events, or at least had those events look very different than they expected them to look and perhaps wanted them to look. And although we've all lived that, as adults, I like to think that we are better able to talk ourselves through those things and understand the rationale for those things. Students in a different way just endure those things and live through those things and maybe struggle quietly with that. They've also experienced loss of security and safety, housing and food insecurity, increased exposure to violence and online harms with all of the technology that people have been using, and threats of physical illness and uncertainty for the future. Lots of rationale for student increased social emotional stressors. What are the short-term impacts? Short-term impacts, ability to learn declines. We know that when students are emotionally struggling, it's hard to focus and do the learning that needs to happen. Disrupted school-based services, immunizations, school meals, mental health support, therapies, a regression in developmental milestones or functioning, increased risk of teen pregnancy, sexual exploitation and violence, and harms. All of these harms are greater for children with disabilities. So those are just the short-term impacts of living for so many months in a pandemic. Let's take a look at the long-term impacts. School dropout rates increase. There's a decrease in highest education levels achieved. There's a reduction in lifelong earnings. When those things happen, when dropout rates increase, when highest education levels achieved decrease, then that is a lifelong impact on your ability to reach your maximum earnings. And there's also an exacerbation of existing achievement gaps across race, gender, and disability. Let's take a look at the rates of psychiatric illness in children in the USA. So these are national numbers. ADH diagnosis in children ages 2 to 17. These are from June of 2020, so relatively recent numbers. Just under 10% of the students, 6.1 million students with a diagnosis of attention deficit hyperactive disorder. 4.5 million students, or 7.4%, diagnosed with a behavior problem. Again, those are students 3 to 17 years of age. 4.4 million with an anxiety diagnosis, and 1.9 million with a depression diagnosis. And I venture to say that if we had June 2021 data at this point, those numbers would definitely have increased. Schools are an important component of mental health care in children and adolescents. This is data that has been shared with us from Cohen's Children's Medical Center in South Oaks. A national survey of drug use and health prior to the pandemic, it was estimated that 13.2% of adolescents received some form of their mental health services in the school setting in the preceding 12 months. Of those students receiving mental health services from 12 to 15, 57% received a portion of their treatment at school. So again, much of the support that students need, or for many students, the support they need in regard to social and emotional health comes at school. And when they're not at school, it is quite difficult for that support to continue in the same way. 35% received all of their mental health services in school. Here are two interesting graphs. So the top one, and this is from October of 2019 to October of 2020. So if you can't see the lines on the bottom are each of those weeks. And in the top chart, what you see, that dotted line is, or the lines on the top are mental health related emergency department visits. Okay, so what do you see in 2019? That's the solid line. You can see there's some, some variation, but pretty much that line, goes up and down and stays in the middle of that graph. But what you see when you look at 2020, during the time when the pandemic was at its height and people were really locked down at home, the number of emergency department visits declined, right? And then you can see as things started to open up, or as the need for it increased, you can see that line. You can see that line go up, and that's the dotted line. If you look at the chart on the bottom, this is the proportion of mental health related emergency department visits compared to, so again, 2019 is the solid line and 2020 is the dotted line. So you can see that the number of visits to the emergency department far began to be about students who were in social emotional crisis rather than other health related crisis. And what happens when social emotional stressors go up? Of course, suicide rates go up as tragic as that is. This suicide is one of the leading 10 causes of death. It's actually second only to unintentional injury or accidents. In students ages 10 to 14, 534 in 2019, and in individuals in ages 15 to 24, 5,954 in 2019. So certainly many individuals, many young individuals making a choice to end their lives because they are struggling with social emotional stressors. And what is related to social emotional stressors and suicide, of course, is drug use. This is data from National Vital Statistics System. What you see is 2018, 19, and 20 data. The blue lines are female, the orange lines are male. About 2/3 of males are struggling or exposed to drug overdose deaths, and about 1/3 of females. So many students or many young people, I'm sorry, dealing with drug overdose deaths. Just taking a look at New York State counties, getting a little bit closer to home, you can see that Suffolk in 2019, which was our last data source, was the highest county in the state as far as deaths involving drugs. Nassau also in one of the top counties related to deaths from drugs. And so recently, one of the things that our partner in Albany, the New York State Council of School Superintendents, does is survey superintendents across the state every year. And what came out of this year's survey, which was done in the fall of 2021, what you see here is superintendents and their rate of concern over different kinds of stressors that they've seen in their students and family. And the one that I want to speak to here is the very top line, mental and emotional health. In 2019, when superintendents were asked this question, 64% of them said that it was a high priority for them. In just the fall of 2021, when superintendents were asked, 80% of them indicated that student well-being was a high level of concern for them. This is also New York State Council of School Superintendents survey results. This is when superintendents were asked, what is the negative impact of students' academic progress due to pandemic disruptions? This chart shows the number of superintendents who indicated a very negative impact. And really across the state, particularly for students with disabilities and English language learners, in most cases, over 50%, very negative impact due to pandemic disruptions. So let's move on to what does this mean what do all of these student demographics and family needs mean for the outcome of the students on Long Island? We know Long Island has a long history of supporting public education. We see that every year when it comes to school budget votes. And the commitment that our communities show and the support that they show during that process. So let's take a look at student outcomes. Graduation rates and outcomes of Long Island students. This is of August 2020. We're waiting for verified data from 2021. The first columns on the left with the red heading is Suffolk, and then we have Nassau, and then we have Long Island in the green and the rest of the state. Suffolk County still graduating 90.3% of their students. Long Island as a whole, 91.5%. Both of those numbers outpacing the rest of the state and New York State as a whole. We see that Long Island has a commitment to not just graduating students, but graduating students with an advanced Regents diploma. This is the fourth line down. 54.2% of the students in Suffolk County graduate with an advanced Regents diploma, which means more Regents passed at a higher level. Long Island as a whole, 58.4% of the students on Long Island graduate with an advanced Regents diploma. And when we compare that to the rest of the state is at 38.9%. So it's not just about getting students across the finish line, it's making sure that they have a robust education. However, when we take a look at what happens when we divide out our low wealth districts, because we talked about the fact that certainly more and more districts on Long Island are low wealth districts compared to our wealthiest districts. The low wealth districts here being in the red, what we see is in our low wealth districts and our 11 lowest wealth districts, only 81% of those students are graduating. 27.4% of those students with an advanced Regents diploma. So certainly success there, but not the kind of success that we would like to see compared to our wealthy districts, which are again up there at 91.7% overall graduation and a 67.5% graduation with advanced Regents diploma. This is the same data in a bar chart for those of you who like to see it visually. Long Island schools still also continue to succeed beyond test scores. I'm sure you all saw this in the news. Regeneron Science Talent Search semifinalists. If Long Island was a state, it would rank #1 in the number of 2022 Regeneron Science Talent Search semifinalists with 49, ahead of California and ahead of the rest of New York State. And in finalists, the finalists were recently announced. 7 of the 40 high school seniors named Regeneron Science Talent Search finalists for 2022 are from Long Island. Congratulations to those districts and those students who are represented in that list. Blue ribbon schools in 2021, even in the midst of a pandemic, 5 additional public Long Island high schools were awarded the blue ribbon, and there they are. Congratulations to them, their leadership, their boards, and the staff who make that happen. Still success, it's not just about academics, right? We have amazing data here for visual arts and music. Thank you to Long Island, or to Longwood for providing us with this data. So here are successes for students in visual arts and music, again, in the midst of a pandemic. And let's take a look at, now that we know how well we've done, let's take a look at what COVID-19 has meant for our budgets, right? So we survey, Long Island Education Coalition surveys school superintendents every year. What this is the number of, or the additional monies that were expended in COVID-19 disaggregated by wealth, right? So the red are districts with the below 1 combined wealth ratio. $28.7 million in our lowest wealth districts were expended for COVID, and in our medium wealth districts, 25.5. Overall, $55.9 million, and this was as of October of 2021. So many more millions spent since then. This is a breakdown of where that money went. The blue biggest piece of the pie is staffing additions at 14.9 million. The next biggest pie, the green, is technology, of course, to make sure that education can continue. And the red, which is the next biggest, was for personal protective equipment. So many millions of dollars expended to keep students in school and to get through this pandemic. Super thankful to Albany and our elected officials. Let's take a look at the impact of additional state aid on school budgets. This is where additional money went. This is our 2021 money. The biggest bar there is additional mental health programs, newly planned summer programming to make sure that students could begin to catch up. Smaller class sizes in some districts and new extended day programs. So money put toward helping students to regain some of the impact of the pandemic. Other uses of increased state aid: new technology upgrades, new equipment, capital upgrades. Some districts put the money towards reducing the tax levy cap. So lots, again, appreciation for that extra money and what districts were able to do with it. Budgeting realities, right? COVID-19 costs. We have a tax levy cap that needs modifications. Bob Schneider mentioned that. We have a history of foundation formula freezes. Super thankful that we've seen a change in that in the last 2 years and promises moving forward. Unreliable aid, making long-term planning difficult. Schools don't know from year to year what their aid will look like. And historically, disproportionate aid coming to Long Island. These are school district tax levy caps over the years. The tax cap you can see is the red line, 2% being the cap. You can see in many years it's been below the cap. And the blue dotted line there is actually inflation, right? So even though in 2022 the cap was 2%, inflation was 4.7%, so far above that. And this is the state budget looking back. Education has fared better than most budget areas, and that is something we need to recognize and be appreciative of. School aid is the blue line. The 2021 school aid does not reflect the Federal CARES Act funding that went in, but we can see 21, 22 does reflect that, and school aid is above Medicaid and above total. So very appreciative of Albany and the recognition of what schools needed to be able to stay open. When New York City is included, the share of state aid directed to Long Island, 12.5%, in spite of the fact that we still are just under 16% of the state's children being educated here. And you can see that disproportionately what these two graphs are, one is Long Island with the yellow portion of that pie being how property tax levy and other revenue supports public education, and the blue piece of that pie being state aid, whereas in the rest of the state, it is much more even, with 47.9% coming from property taxes and 44% coming from state aid. This is a chart that shows more detail and related to that and exactly how that aid breaks down. There's a lot of numbers in that chart, but I encourage you to look at it more carefully when you have it in your hands. So let's talk about how we reshape the future as we wrap up. It is important that we understand the communities and students that we serve, and this presentation and all of the data that was put into it, appreciative of the research office here at Eastern Suffolk BOCES for partnering with this work. We need to take the lessons that we've learned over the last 2 years and continue to provide high quality, well-rounded educational programs to continue to get not only the results we've gotten, but results like that for all of our students. We need to create multi-year plans utilizing the state aid we have been allocated and promised, and we need to address long-term cost drivers and outdated mandates. Some legislative priorities: increasing the flexibility in the use of fund balance and reserves so that districts can plan more long-term. APPR adjustments. Needless to say, education has been tremendously disrupted, as have assessments for students. We're asking for additional flexibility, ongoing flexibility on the annual professional performance review legislation so that districts can move through that in a way that's good for educators. We need to take a serious look at hiring shortages and educator diversity. Make sure that the educators in our classrooms and leading our buildings reflect the communities that we serve, and make sure that we can fill the important positions that we need to educate our students. Supporting NYSSBA as well, and the importance of internet connectivity to make sure that we have no disruptions. Focus on our English language learners, a thoughtful review of the foundation formula. Bob Schneider spoke to that as well. We are 100% behind that, and amending the WICS law related to project labor agreements in school construction. Long past due modifications to the tax levy cap. Again, important and something that we've been asking for a long time. I think this is the year to make that happen. And in closing, what do we need to serve our collective communities? I'm speaking directly to our elected officials. So we have and need ongoing collaboration with our legislators, and understanding that school leaders, school boards, teachers, and the communities we serve have worked really, really hard to do what we've done in the last 2 years. We need a recognition that the needs on Long Island are changing, meaning the way we do school, the way we fund school here also needs to change. So we encourage you to continue that momentum and sustainable funding that supports the changing needs for the future of Long Island students. So again, thank you all for your attention. Thank you for caring. Thank you for the leadership that you play in this in many different ways. Thank you to Eastern Suffolk BOCES Board and Administration and Suffolk County School Superintendent's leadership in this process. So that is it. Thank you again. And back to you, Lance.
Thank you, Dr. Lutz. Probably one of my favorite presentations that I've been watching ever since I was an assistant principal myself, and every year that I get to see it, I think it gets better and better. One of the most informative presentations that we have as school districts and school boards to move forward and truly advocate for our communities. I know that you're leaving, but I will do everything in my power to convince you to come back one more time, at least to be in person one last time. So don't go too far. Thank you very much. Next, I'm going to pass this presentation this morning off to the very capable hands of our Board of Education President, Dr. Rhonda Stitham, and Board of Education Vice President, Victoria Malloy, who will move forward and moderate today's conversation between our students, our school districts, and our local legislators. Ladies.
Okay, good morning and thank you for joining us. We'd like to begin by thanking the dedicated members of our legislative committee for their advocacy and hard work throughout the year, particularly our students who are involved in school activities and academics, but still make the time for our committee.
Good morning, everyone. First off, I would just like to let everyone know that the presentation and the advocacy and all of the materials, along with the video of this event, will be shared on the Longwood District website following this presentation. While the 17th and now 19th annual legislative workshop may look different in the past years, we gathered at the middle school. We are so proud to know that so many district representatives, school board affiliates, PTA members, students, and public education advocates continue to join us year after year to unite as a single voice for the future of our schools. We want to remind our attendees that the questions discussed today have been previously determined, that chat function of this webinar has been disabled to provide enough time to facilitate the broadcast range of topics and perspective.
We also appreciate and thank our legislators for joining us this morning. And we ask that our senators and assembly members share their time when responding to questions. Let's welcome all together and bring them into the panel. Senator Phil Boyle, Senator Mario Matera, Senator Anthony Palumbo, Senator Alexis Wyke, Assemblyman Joe DeStefano, Assemblyman Michael Durso, Assemblyman Steve Engelbright, Assemblyman Michael Fitzpatrick, Assemblyman Jarrett Gandolfo, Assemblywoman Jody Giglio, Assemblyman Doug Smith, Assemblyman Fred Thiel, and unfortunately, Congressman Lee Zeldin is unable to join us. He is currently on Army Reserve duty and is unable to attend. Welcome, everyone.
Okay, at this point, we are going to start our question and answer with our constituents. And as they speak with the legislators, I will announce the school and the individual that will be questioning your legislators. So our first question today comes from Patchogue-Medford School District, ex officio student member of the Board of Education, Sean Owen. Sean?
Good morning, everyone. I just want to start off by saying thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak and to sit in this event, as it is very informative and very interesting to find out what's coming for our education program. So my question is, so since the start of the pandemic, the United States Department of Agriculture has reimbursed schools for free lunches that can be offered to all students. That we have seen throughout the pandemic. but this benefit is set to expire in June of 2022. So my question is, what can you do to support keeping free meals as a permanent offering in schools, since it benefits so many students and families who otherwise would not have readily lunches available?
Okay. Who would like to start off? Okay, Mr. Smith, Assemblyman Smith.
So good to be here with you. It's always great to be at this breakfast, one of my favorite events of the year as the ranking member of the Education Committee in the New York State Assembly. I've been attending this breakfast for the last decade, I think, as a former math teacher and legislative staffer before. So welcome, Sean. Thank you for your question. I think this is an important discussion topic this year during the budget. As you know, we know that student performance, when students go to school, some of our students, the only meal they get in the day is what they eat at school, So I think that as we're looking at, and I see a number of my colleagues still logging in here, my one colleague, Assemblyman Mike Durso, is having a tough time getting in here just to the tech folks. Oh, there he is. I think that this is something that we definitely have to work on with our federal partners because it all comes down to how are we going to fund this? Where do we get the funding to provide this? And people have advocated this, and I jokingly say, with the high property taxes we pay, it should include a free dinner as well for our students. But we, I think for me, this is something that somebody who was a teacher in the classroom, it is a priority that I think we should offer that. And I think a problem that I have in some of the school districts that I represent, your district included, I represent part of Patrick Medford, the parents in our community are very proud. And a lot of parents are eligible for the benefit, the free and reduced lunch benefit, and they're not applying for this. And it's something that, a number of these aid categories are calculated based on the number of students that receive free and reduced lunch. So it's always been a challenge to get parents to sign up for this benefit. So I can't speak for my colleagues, but I personally do support the option of having a free lunch and breakfast available to all students with the option to pay for additional food if they want to. But again, it all comes down to how are we going to fund it? And again, this year we have federal assistance due to COVID, but next year we're going to probably be back to the same fights we handle every year. But again, thanks, Sean, for being involved.
Thank you so much for your response. Anyone else? Mr. Matero?
Thank you so much. And this is my second legislative breakfast, and I thank you so much for hosting this. This is so important. Public schools and what's been happening with our, last 2 years has been very upsetting to all of us. And I just want to commend our educators for being there, especially with the virtual and the hybrid. And, I saw my daughter last year, she graduated Smithtown East, and I just saw what was happening with her. And I just wanted to get everybody back to school. And it's so important that our students are engaged with, their fellow students, and especially our educators. They're doing an amazing job. And they had to reinvent the wheel, all of educators. And again, we're getting back. I see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm looking forward about the mask. And I know you asked the question about the free lunches, and I want to make sure that we got, looks like this budget at $31.2 billion in this budget. We just need to make sure that monies are allocated for programs like free lunches. And just like with the Assemblyman Smith just said, we should have, even dinner and maybe even dessert on top of that dinner that we should have for our families. So you know what? Everybody's gone through a lot right now. Again, do I feel at the end of the lights at the end of the tunnel that we're going to be moving forward so we get back to normalcy? And that's our goal, is to get back to normalcy. And, our children, and we need to focus on what happened before 2 years ago and need to move forward. So you know what, I am going to be there, but I just want to make sure the money's that if this budget goes through is going to be allocated properly. And you know what, I have no problem at all with our free lunch program. Thank you, Sean. Thank you so much for attending today.
Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Well,
Okay,
Sean.
Mr. Thiel.
Okay.
Thank you. First of all, Sean, thank you for your question. Thank you to the Longwood School District. I have attended many of these legislative breakfasts through the years. I For the last couple of years, I've certainly missed our ability to do this in person. It is one of the highlights, I think, of the year, especially as we go into our budget process. So I just want to say thank you at the outset, just for the breakfast. You know, the question, there's always the first question, you know, having been through these, as I said, for many years, which is kind of a federal question. And, you know, we're kind of jumping in on the federal question as state representatives. And I think it is imperative that on the free lunch that's going to end in June, that we work with our federal representatives, our congressmen, our United States senators to try to work to get an extension of this program. We've seen a great deal of food insecurity, not just among school students, but throughout our communities, you know, during the pandemic. You know, talking and speaking with some of our local food pantries, that continues. And it's going to continue into the foreseeable future. You know, family budgets, family expenses are out there. It's not just food. You know, people have to, you know, make rent. They have to pay their household expenses. And some of that is going to continue into the foreseeable future. So, you know, this has been a federal program. It's a critical federal program, and we certainly need to work with our federal representatives to continue to provide this kind of funding for school meals that I think is so critical in dealing. It's one part of the solution in dealing with food insecurity that's going to continue as we continue to transition with the pandemic. So thanks for the question, and again, it's good to be here today. Thank you.
Okay, Assemblyman DeStefano.
Okay. Again, as my colleagues before me have said, thank you for inviting us to this breakfast that we've done remotely a couple of years now. I was actually downstairs at my front door waiting for breakfast to show up this morning so that I wouldn't have to go out and get any. But I think Assemblyman Thiel said it the best, is that there's no reason why our children should be going to school hungry or being hungry throughout the day. I think this is a cooperative effort with all levels of government to secure the monies needed so that these kids have what they need to get through the day. Assemblyman Smith mentioned that sometimes lunch is the only thing that these kids get in the day for food. And how would that feel? I remember going back to zoo, and thanks Patrick Medford for the answer, my alma mater, always going to be proud of that. You know, it's one thing to go to school with anxiety and things of just being a kid, then put on top of that you're hungry throughout the day, and that just adds more to the anxiety that you currently already probably have as a kid going through school. So again, I think it's more like a cooperative effort with all levels of government to come up with the resources necessary so that the kids don't have to go through that. You know, obviously we all advocate for as much money as we can get for education through our state. And as Assemblyman Thiel said, that the federal government provides the monies for this program. So it's incumbent upon us as your representatives to lobby them to make sure that the money is there for the school districts to provide this necessary service for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assemblyman Fitzpatrick.
Yes, thank you. Great to be with everyone. Sean, I don't know how much exposure you had to the laws or principles of economics in your high school education, but one law is there is no such thing as a free lunch. While I believe there's no disagreement from anyone on this panel that a child who qualifies for that benefit should receive it, whenever something is free, it tends to be abused. So I'm curious, when you want it universally free, the cost will dramatically increase because there will be children whose families don't need the benefit but will try to get it. So my concern is, yes, I want kids fed. I want them to be able to perform in school, but I worry about abuse to the program because we've seen that across the board, that people will take advantage of programs if they are free. I hope there are strict guidelines so that abuse is minimized, and it would be wonderful if it could be eliminated, but that's, I think, a pipe dream. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Senator White.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having this so we have an opportunity to meet with everyone. And I'm going to say, I don't think there could possibly be abuse to feeding students. I know some students whether their household has 2 working parents or they're just busy and they run off to school and they didn't have an opportunity to eat. I think what we saw during the pandemic, as we all looked at our individual school districts, we saw something in common, which was that it was universally a need. Food was a need. Food insecurity was unexpectedly widely distributed between populations, whether they were high income or low income. So I think for the moment, making sure that our students have food to eat and that we fund this project, to make sure that students have proper nutrition during the school day, I think that should be a priority, at least for the next few years. We are going to see a lot of issues, mental health issues. We see learning loss issues. And I think food insecurity is still going to be with us for a little while. So I think those issues should be something that we keep in mind as we move forward for the next couple of years.
Thank you so much. Assemblyman Durso.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having all of us. Sean, thank you for taking part in this, asking questions and being a part of this panel. I agree with everyone that's spoken so far that I think we need to continue to lobby our federal partners to make sure that we do have the funding for this. It's so important, as many of the other people on this panel have said, that students don't go throughout the day hungry or have the possibility of going throughout the day hungry. If that funding does fall upon the state to take over that, I think finding other sources of revenue to bring in to maybe fund these projects like this, make sure everybody does have the availability for a free lunch in school that need it and that want it. And then, as someone else has said, also working with our local food banks, if it's incumbent upon the state to take that on, to maybe work in some kind of partnership. But I don't think there's any way, any time, any need to ever make a student or anyone feel hungry during the day, or as Mr. DeStefano said, the mental anguish a kid would go through during the day, thinking about when their next meal is or possible next meal is, as a parent, doesn't work for me. So I would do anything to support, make sure that we have the funding that's needed for programs like this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Assemblyman Thiel, did you have one other comment? No? Okay. All right. I see your hand up. So I just wanted to make sure.
I guess I just forgot to put it back down. My
Okay.
apologies.
Oh, no problem. Okay, Mrs. Malloy.
Okay, so we're going to move on to your second question, which is brought to you by Sachem School District, Rob Scavo, who is the Board of Education Vice President. Just wait for him to come in.
Hi, could you hear me?
We can hear you. Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I just want to start my video. I don't know why. Okay.
There you go.
Good morning. My name is Rob Scavo. I'm the Vice President of the Sachem School District Board of Education. First and foremost, I want to thank Longwood School District for putting this together, the Board of Education and the administration. I know it's a tremendous task, and we're certainly grateful for that. I also want to thank the elected officials for taking time out of their busy schedules, to hear our concerns and answer our questions. It's once again greatly appreciated by all boards of education on Long Island. In many, if not all of our Suffolk County school districts, we believe that the very best place for a child to learn is in the school with their teachers and fellow students. To that end, we have maintained policies to minimize disruptions from the in-school learning experience as best as possible, given the myriad of pandemic-related regulations now in place. However, our goal remains to return our students, staff, and by extension, our engaged community to pre-pandemic normalcy in the quickest manner possible, using safe, science-based approach. However, it's not possible for us to implement given the lack of information, sharing between the governor's office, state health officials, and the local school district. There's been no sharing of exact science behind how these decisions are being made, nor has been clear guidance provided by the state. So our question is, what specific metrics and guidelines do we need to meet and achieve to safely transition back to normalcy for our school-age children, including the reduction or elimination of quarantines, universal masking, and social distancing as an example? Our community, our administration, our boards of education, our staff and educators, and most importantly, our students deserve a clear answer and guidance so that we have something to work towards and something to look forward to. Thank you.
Okay, so who would like to start off with answering that one? Okay, Assemblyman Smith.
Rob, it's good to see you, my friend, from Sachem School District, my alma mater, and we're neighbors in Holbrook. So this is, it's good to see you on this breakfast. I think the question is something that's on the mind of every single attendee today and school board member, because the state has not provided any, well, I shouldn't say any, but the state has not provided direct metrics of when we can expect these masking policies or quarantine policies to end, and it's been continued. I think it might come to us as a surprise to some of the people on the call that we're still in a state of emergency, a new state of emergency, and it's something that that I think all of us legislators receive calls frequently where people, school board members, teachers, parents are confused because they think that it's the same state of emergency from the beginning of the pandemic. But there's a new state of emergency as of December 3rd for the Omicron variant. So as that continues, these policies do continue. So I think that the trouble with this question, and again, I'm just speaking for myself, is I feel, every week we go up to Albany, we represent the people as the elected legislators, the Senate and Assembly. And then we also have, the Board of Regents that handles education policy. You have the Department of Health. But I feel that because now we are able to safely meet as a legislature, that we should be making those decisions. We should be at this late stage in the pandemic. And I say the late stage, it's a hopeful thought that this is a late stage, but I think that we should be setting those metrics. I believe my colleague, Mike Durso, here on the call has a bill actually that talks to that, talks about labeling a school as a different category as to when we can meet those needs. But at this moment, I think that that's something to provide that light at the end of the tunnel. I would urge, the executive branch, the governor, to come out and show communities what metrics we're looking at, because right now, as you know, and as a lot of people on this call know, school board meetings have become very hostile as of late, the last 2 years. And people feel that it's their opportunity to voice their concerns about any number of issues, including pandemic related, where their passion might be directed towards school board members, where they probably should pick up the phone and call all of us. And we, especially the members on this call, would be happy to take those questions directly. So I agree with you. I think that we need to set those things. And right now, it's not set. So thanks for the question.
Thank you very much. Okay, Assemblyman Thiel.
Yeah, well, Rob, thank you for the question. I have to admit that when I was going through all of this yesterday, I really liked your original question on UPK funding a lot better than this question. But, listen, you're asking the question that everybody's asking, to be serious, and something that we really, as we're seeing the numbers come down, everybody wants to know, well, as we get through the Omicron surge that we have, what's going to happen next, and when can we try to get back to normal? I would say this, in your question is the specific metrics and guidelines. Certainly as a politician, I don't know if I feel qualified for that, and whether the legislature should be making that decision, but there has been a lack of specifics. I know some of my colleagues have signed letters to the health department asking for some specifics. We haven't gotten them either. What I would like to see us progress to is that, originally we were going to let these decisions be made locally, and we got away from that to kind of this statewide situation. So the governor said she's going to be making some announcements with regard to this in the coming days. What I would urge her to do is to return these decisions to the local health departments, working with the school districts, to make those determinations. I think we can, Suffolk and Nassau is different than New York City. It's different than Plattsburgh. It's different than Buffalo. I would like to see a collaborative effort where this is, goes from the state back to, local health departments, working with the local school districts to make decisions based on specific information that's going on in individual districts, with specific standards. The state health department, I think, has a role in that, to provide the information that they have and to share it with the local health departments to make that decision. But I think it should be science-based. I think our local health departments have that information, and them working with the school districts. I would hope that would be the next step as we try to move forward to which hopefully will be more normalcy.
Thank you. Okay, Assemblyman DeStefano.
Oh, great question. I'm confused just as much as all the kids are and teachers and administrators are about where we are. A couple of weeks ago, we got the decision that the mask mandate was no longer constitutional. That day, a number of school districts decided that they were going to make masks optional. The next day, that all changed again. This is like a flip-flop every single day. And the people that are getting hurt, the most of it are the people who are actually in the schools having to deal with it. A few years back, when we had a previous governor who said that once we get to a certain point, we were going to, undo all of the mandates. We were going to take, get rid of the mask, get rid of, and then we had to all be vaccinated. And that was another issue. I think everybody just needs to get on the same page and have some consultation with those who do make the decisions and not coming from one person. Again, she's talking to the health commissioner and the regents and things like that. I'm more of the guy who wants to give it back to local control. All the school board were elected by the people of their communities. They know their communities better than we know their communities. We know some of our communities, but we don't know all of our communities. I think local control is probably something that we are seriously not giving a shot at making this work, especially when you have all kinds of different opinions and mandates and things of that nature. I think that it's incumbent upon the school boards and the administrators in their school districts to make the decision on what's best for them, because they know their communities better than we do.
Thank you. Okay, Assemblyman Durso.
Rob, thank you for the question. Nice to meet you. Again, I can echo some of the sentiments of Assemblyman DeStefano that we're all just as confused as you are. And believe it or not, sometimes you get the information before we do. But as Assemblyman Smith said, I didn't want to have to create that bill in regards to masks and the metric that it would follow. But as you said, having some kind of answer, having some kind of information, a metric, as they say, to follow so we understand where it's coming from, where it's going, and where we're going to be in the future. I mean, listen, we could, masks could come off in school, and social distancing and quarantine could come off in school now. But what happens next year if there's, another wave? This could be a seasonal thing. We don't know. As Assemblyman Thiel said, I'm not a doctor. I'm not the health commissioner. I'm not a scientist. But the bill that I put in, and since Assemblyman Smith mentioned it, it's A8487, kind of a shameless plug. But it does, what it does do is give a metric to the legislature and the health commissioner and the CDC to decide upon where that level is that students in schools need to be masked. And when it becomes below that level, then it could be optional for anybody to have it. Again, it's not a bill I wanted to create, but it's something I wanted to put in so that we had numbers, we had hard data and a line that we knew if we got above this level, that masks would now be put on in school. And again, it was more of a test run too, because if you take a look at the bill online, it's being met with some resistance. Because again, is it about the science or is it about the mandate? For lack of a better word. Again, we need answers as parents, as legislators. You as a parent or a school board member want answers and something to follow. I feel that this gives us some kind of line to follow, and that's why I put in. So again, please, as Assemblyman Smith said, call your legislators. I believe in local control. The school board members, the teachers, school board members, parents, the stakeholders in the areas know what's going on best in those areas. And I think having their voices heard very important on this matter. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Senator Matera.
This is, thank you so much. And Rob, thank you for bringing this up. This is such an important issue for everybody. I mean, it's just been, and the district that I represent, the parents are really upset and uptight because, it's their children. Mandating is this government control. Back in 1953, obviously with the Commission of Health, and back in 2014, what happened with Ebola, that the Commissioner of Health got the authority to mandate because of any kind of pandemic. There's a bill that Senator O'Mara in our conference that has out that 90 days, obviously, if the Commissioner of Health puts a mandate forward, that after 90 days, let us legislators do our job. And you know what? So we could do that. So it's a 90-day, after 90 days, there will be a law that the legislators get to, vote on things like this, especially what's happening with, mandates, and especially with the what's happening with the shots and with the vaccines, and what's happening with the masks. It's very upsetting that just like one of my colleagues said about it's unconstitutional. There was the Supreme Court. We had one day, a letter went right out in Smithtown that guess what? You don't have to mask our children. And then the appellate comes in and oversees that and supersedes that. And there it was, our children had to go back with masks again. It's very upsetting to me over time where there it was, we go into a restaurant, you walk into a restaurant with a mask on, you sit down and you eat, you have dinner or whatever, and you're sitting there, you can take your mask off. And you know what, I'm not gonna go sit there and say that we have to be protected, yes, but you know what? The masks that we have out right now, I just feel that, you're supposed to be changing them every 2 hours, and these children with anxiety, what's going on, and our children are very much being affected by what's happening with these masks. And it's time that we as legislators are supposed to do our job. And that's what I like to see with this bill. It gives 90 days. And after the 90 days, us as legislators get to do our job. So that's what I feel is important for our future. So hopefully that can answer the question how I feel about this, but it's time for us to unmask our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Senator White, please.
Thank you. It's a great question. It's one we've all been talking about for quite some time, so I'll just be brief. I've always been a big supporter of local control. I think our school districts have always done a fantastic job, no matter what the topic is, taking control of the situation and making sure our students are safe, our teachers are safe. I think the governor needs to create a solid matrix if she's going to keep sticking to these rules for a long-term period of time. Otherwise, I think she needs to turn it over to the school districts and make sure that they are able to safeguard their community the best they can. And that's what I support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
So,
Dr.
thank you.
Saitham. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. The other thing I want to say is also thank you for your support. And I know our original question had to do with funding UPK, and that was answered 2 weeks ago when we got our state aid runs. But thank you for supporting universal pre-K and fully funding it.
Thank you very much. Okay, Dr. Saitham. Next
Okay,
question.
our next question comes from Suffolk Region PTA Associate Director Gerard Bringman. Mr. Bringman. Okay, I guess we'll come back to Mr. Bringman if, oh, do I see him coming in? No. Okay, Ms. Malloy, would you like to go ahead and move to question 4? Okay, so we'll go ahead and move to question 4. This one is from Shoreham Wading River School District sophomore Sophia Minion and Elizabeth Zabino. Okay, we're back to Gerard, I guess. I see him now coming on. We must be having some technical difficulties, so we apologize. Mr. Bringman, if you would like to go ahead and ask your question. Mr. Bringman, are you with us? I see him on our screen, but Mr. Bringman?
just have somebody else ask the question.
Okay, there he is muted. Now he's unmuted. Mr. Brinkman, are you there? Otherwise, I will just go ahead and ask the question for you. Okay, so the question is, prior to the pandemic, superintendent surveyed said that the area that they most felt needed additional funding was in dealing with mental health issues. Needless to say, since the pandemic began, the situation has only gotten worse. Mr. Brinkman, are you there? Okay, question is, would you support dedicated funding for schools to assist them in dealing with mental health issues? And if so, how do you feel these funds would be best spent? Okay, Assemblyman Smith.
And sorry, I'm probably going to answer a lot of questions, so you can feel free to swap around people. But Jerry, it's good to see you. I can't hear you, but you're one of the loudest voices for education on Long Island. So I can see you here with us. With respect to the mental health question, a few things just to be brief. I think we really do need to focus on hiring additional social workers and school psychologists in our schools. It's something that our students really need, that extra support, not just in this pandemic time, but every year consistently when we attend this breakfast. So when schools are asked, if you had more money, what would the money be spent on? And the answer is always mental health. Now, the problem is we've gotten additional funding the last 2 years. And because of the additional challenges and because of even in a non-pandemic year, state mandates are ever increasing, it seems. The money is not able to be spent on those critical mental health resources. So I would support additional social workers and school psychologists. As somebody who taught in the classroom, I believe that when we're teaching children, we need to make sure that we're teaching the whole child. It's not just the content area that we're teaching. I was a math teacher, but we want to make sure the students are in and of themselves, good as people, doing well, and that includes their mental well-being. Now, additionally, and I'll just kind of fork off for just a moment, social emotional learning. I think that we need to focus on this, and I think that we need to go a little bit beyond the buzzwords. A lot of people have contacted me in the recent days regarding social emotional learning, and I think that with a number of topics, as we're talking about them, I think that there can be a little bit of a misassociation of what these things are. So again, I support additional funding and support for mental health. I'm actually putting together, and it was supposed to be on February 10th, but then we got hit with this new surge. But I'm looking, and I was hoping to actually promote it in person with all of you, putting a flyer on every table, but I'm going to be sending an email out. I have assembled a kind of a blue ribbon panel of mental health professionals, and probably in April or May, I'm going to be doing a panel discussion and question and answer segment entitled Mental Health in the Classroom and Beyond, Turning I Can't into I Can. And we have some great professionals. And what they're going to be talking about, they're going to be talking about social emotional learning. They're going to be talking about executive function and self-regulation and how we can help our students in the classroom. So these are things that I think that, we are looking at. And in terms of as a state legislator, I will continue to advocate for additional funding because we need qualified professionals in the classroom that can provide these services to our students. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to remind all of the panel officials, if we could try to keep our comments to 3 to 4 minutes, that way we could make sure everyone gets a chance to speak and we get all of the questions, and that would be great. We're going to move on to Senator Palumbo.
I'm sorry, if I could just interrupt for a moment. This is Tech One. If there are students or people who are going to be asking questions, if you could please put your full name in as your attendee name, particularly if you have a phone number, we need to be able to identify you by your first name. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Palumbo.
Thank you, Doctor. Good morning. Good to see you all. And Doug, you were like 4.5 minutes, so I think you were pretty close, buddy. And Doug always has great ideas, and he's been a great sounding board for many years when we were together in the assembly. And this is something that, of course, I think it's a critical mass right now. The mental health issues, obviously, they've been severely exacerbated by the pandemic. The segue from the mask question as well, that I think that doesn't help, that it just creates an overall existential fear that these children are feeling. we do have, and in the executive budget, there's $100 million for the Recover from COVID school program. So that's a good start. That those are for. I think that money would be best spent on mental health concerns. Of course, we have it. Assemblyman Thiel, as he and Senator Laval, and then subsequently we did it on the North Fork, and now we have the North Fork and South Fork mental health initiatives to deal with the dynamic of the East End, where they don't have necessarily the resources of Western Suffolk County, but that's something that's been near and dear to our heart for many years, is dealing with the troubles that children face, bullying and so forth. So I think we certainly are we're on something that those extra funds should be directed in that way. Again, we have a lot of extra revenues. Hopefully there's going to be a real big chunk of money going to our schools. It may be more of a one shot than anything with all the COVID money we received, but still that's something that is a priority. And I think we all, and speaking for myself, I certainly do. And I think we all support that type of those types of programs, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. Assemblyman Fitzpatrick.
Yes, thank you. The sad thing about this mental health, these increasing mental health issues, is that a lot of this is self-inflicted. Whether it's mask mandates and COVID restrictions that have are long past their usefulness, to issues of marijuana legalization. That's going to increase the cost to school districts to deal with mental health where there's marijuana in the home. And if it's in the home, it's going to be in the schools. Because of open borders, there's a more than 1,000% increase in fentanyl. So open borders on our southern border is creating mental health issues for us because drugs are coming in. There's no security at our southern border. Add the newly legalized sports gambling, which no doubt some of our students are going to fall into the trap of gambling because of sports gambling on their iPhones. So much of this is self-inflicted because of a lack of the federal and state legislatures' ability to deal responsibly with rising costs, but they don't because they don't want to upset certain powerful interest groups that want to protect the status quo. There is a limit to how much money we're going to be able to spend on all of these things. With inflation rising, I am not an advocate of piercing the cap or changing the cap because we have to get inflation under control. But we are losing population. And as we see the influx of people, no doubt, to Long Island in some of these districts, I think Brentwood has like a 4,000 student increase. Much of that is from the open borders situation. And we see communities like mine where people are saying, I'm out of here because of the high costs. We're going to have increasing difficulty supporting not just public education, but our local governments as well, if we don't start addressing some of these costs. So I think we'll do our best to try to help you address these new problems and old problems that continue to get a little worse. But boy, the legislatures, I think, failed miserably in allowing, using vices to pay for public expenditures. It's a road to perdition. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. To move this along a little bit more efficiently, we are going to allow for 2 more answers to this question. So I'm going to go to Senator White for that question and answer.
Thank you so much. I'll be brief. I think it's a really good opportunity for school districts to partner with organizations that can offer these services as well. So I would support funding these to establish the infrastructure for these partnerships and to look to change any regulatory roadblocks between SED and OMH to make that happen. So not just hiring within the district, but partnering with outside counseling services. And I know we have a school district who's done a great job with that, who kind of serves as a role model. So we can look towards William Floyd. I know they've been doing this for quite some time. So it's certainly another option to entertain to be budget friendly.
Okay, thank you. And last one, Senator Matera.
Thank you, Senator White, for that, because yesterday I attended the Sunshine prevention over in Port Jeff Station. And that's another outside agency that could help, help our students for our future. And it was just very emotional for me yesterday. I went with Bishop Robinson from the Quorum Church. And you know what, we need to make sure that we're on top of this, especially these next couple of years. I was very much working hard to make sure that we got our children back to school, especially the last year, making sure that they had the end of the year, they weren't virtual, and it really made a huge difference for the mental health. So, to get them back to school. And so this is important that we got that, being virtual was, I really think was something that, obviously we know all created this. And we didn't know what was happening with this pandemic. This is something that was unprecedented for all of us. So you know what, getting everybody back to school, but we need to make sure that we have, some kind of social workers, because our educators need to get back to their job. For them to be a social worker and to be an educator is just too much for our teachers. So they really just need to get back to teaching. We need to make sure these next couple of years are important, that we have, with the guidance counselors, social workers that are going to be there for our students. So I want to do whatever I have to do to help with that. Again, just remember what I said about the Sunshine facility. It's just a great place. Another option. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Malloy.
Okay, we're moving on to question number 4, coming to you from the Shoreham-Wading River School District. We have 2 sophomores, Sophia Minion and Elizabeth Sabino.
Hi, it's just going to be me today, and I would like to say thank you so much for your time. My question is, vaccine hesitancy for children is high in Suffolk County. Will the state impose a vaccine mandate for school attendance? If so, when?
Okay, so, all right, we'll start with Assemblyman Gandolfo.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for the question, Elizabeth. In order for the state to impose a vaccine mandate, legislation would have to get passed. Governor Hochul herself has seemed to acknowledge that it's not something that she can do via mandate or that the health department can do via mandate. Personally, I am not supportive of a vaccine mandate for school attendance. There's, when looking at the data, there's really nothing to suggest that it's necessary. Excuse me. The numbers just aren't there for serious illness among youth. It's more the higher risk groups. And the CDC director did admit that with the most current variant, the vaccine's not stopping transmission, it is lessening symptoms. So with that new information, I just don't think there's any merit to the idea that a vaccine mandate for school children is really necessary or would be a productive endeavor at all.
Thank you. Okay, Assemblyman Durso.
Again, Elizabeth, thanks so much for coming on, asking the question. I not to belabor the point, but I echo the sentiments of Assemblyman Gandolfo. It's something that would have to go to the legislature. It's something that I would vote against. I don't think that there should be a vaccine mandate requirement in our schools. Again, all the data that we've seen from whichever news channel you watch, from whatever person you want to listen to, that children are safest in school. This does not affect children the same way that it may affect an adult that has what they call comorbidities or any other, health issues. Again, it's something I would not support being mandated. Again, I believe in the parent's choice. Discuss it with your child, your doctor, your family. But again, as far as a mandate goes, I will not support that. Thanks for your question, Elizabeth.
Okay, Assemblyman Fitzpatrick.
Yes, thank you. I am vehemently opposed to the imposition of a vaccine mandate. There is no long-term data yet on the possible impacts on young girls of childbearing age. And the thought of mandating this vaccine to my 3-year-old granddaughter is repulsive to me. Or any young child. This decision belongs with the parents and the parents alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblyman Fred Thiel.
Yes, thank you. As previous speakers have said, this would require legislation. The governor, several months ago made kind of an offhanded remark about vaccine mandates, but I note that there was nothing in her State of the State address about this. And there was nothing in her state budget presentation about this either. So, the question is, do I think a vaccine mandate is coming? And I would say the answer to that is no. I've spoken with a lot of you've heard from some of my colleagues today, but I've spoken with a lot of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. And I think they're listening to people in their district. And I would point out that, I've heard from parents that themselves who have gotten vaccinated, who believe that the vaccine is an extremely useful tool in combating the virus, but they do not want to see it mandated on their children. I just think there's a lack of consensus in the state and in the community with regard to legislating some sort of mandate. So the answer to your question is, even though the governor mentioned it a couple of months ago, she hasn't mentioned it since. And maybe she's hearing from the same constituents we are. So I just don't think the consensus is there, for any kind of legislation. I don't expect there to be a vaccine mandate voted on during the current session.
Thank you very much. Okay, Senator Palumbo. Did you have your hand up?
Thanks, Vicky. I did. I just wanted to give a shout out to Elizabeth in Senate District 1. Sure. So way to go, Elizabeth. But yeah, I agree. And it was well said by my previous colleagues that, it's a risk assessment when it comes to children. That vaccines are an amazing medical technology. They work, they're great. This is more or less a therapeutic, right? Because it's not like you don't get the disease. And you're seeing now that people who are testing positive or even in hospitals, they're overwhelmingly vaccinated. So I think that at the end of the day, that like anything else in medicine, you have to evaluate your risks and the reward. So for example, if you are someone who has late stage dementia and you're dangerous, yet the medication that they can give you could possibly cause death, that's a situation where maybe you will want that medication because this person is they're going to be walking in the middle of the street, or fighting with staff, or doing whatever they have to do. And those are evaluations you should be making at all times. So when it comes to the efficacy of the vaccine versus the potential risks to children, because we don't have enough data, I'm against it. I'm generally against government mandating anything. I'm a less is more kind of guy, but when it comes to students, I think that's a terrible idea, and it should be personal choice. Thanks.
Okay, we just have time for one more. Senator White, please.
Thanks so much. I know the governor was persistent in the fall months saying that she was going to mandate it. She was even going to speed it up. We've seen her in recent months walking that back, but there are bills that exist. And so if those bills get voted on the floor, we could see a vaccine mandate. And so I encourage people to reach out to legislators and let them know where they stand on it. I totally oppose it because the learning loss and the mayhem it would create in our school district is unreal. And so I strongly oppose it, and I hope we don't move in that direction. It's the wrong direction to move in. Parents should have this, have the only say in this, and not school districts.
Thank you very much. Okay, Dr. Statham, next question.
Okay, let's, Mr. Montero, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand.
I know you only had one question, but this is just so important. I'm just going to say I'm totally opposed to mandates, government control, parents' choice. And you know what? We have healthy children. Let our parents do their job. That's the reason why we're parents. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along. Next question is Hampton Bay School District Superintendent Loris Clemenson.
Good morning. A special hello to our elected officials on the East End, Senator Palumbo and Assemblyman Thiel. Thank you all for being here this morning, the entire delegation. And as Dr. Lutz noted in her presentation earlier this morning, a thank you is in order for the advocacy that you do on our behalf up in Albany, particularly as it relates to state aid and funding. So that's my question today. And those of you who have been with us for a long time know that we often ask, can we have more money from Albany? And the money has arrived, and districts have put that those investments to good use. And so as school leaders and boards of education, now we're in a position to look long-term. And so we're looking to what happens after the pandemic. So coupled with the commitment of foundation aid being fully funded and the influx of federal dollars, we're looking to sustain those investments as long as possible. So the mental health or the educational programs that we put in place don't fall off a fiscal cliff at some point. We want to maintain stability and reliability for taxpayers as well. So the question is, would you consider in this session or in the future, revisiting the unrestricted fund balance limit of 4% and increasing it to something that's more? So even an 8% restriction would still be more restrictive than municipalities who don't have that. But boards of education would have that local control to manage that fund balance to sustain investment over time. And again, the heart of that is to prevent a fiscal cliff in investments that boards of education and schools are making at this time. So thank you again for your participation and for the question.
Okay, Assemblyman Engelbright.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you. So
I'm not sure what happened to the audio, excuse me, to the video part, but let me just say, I believe that it does make sense to give additional discretion and to remove the 4% limit as we transition out of this pandemic. We certainly don't want to hamstring our districts and cause a cascade effect of negative impacts on everything that we want to see in a constructive direction for our students. So yes, I would favor increasing discretion, and 8% I think would be a reasonable next step.
okay, thank you for your response, Assemblyman Thiel.
Well, thank you so much, and welcome, Lars. It's good to talk to you again. I'm going to embarrass Lars for a minute because this year Lars was named the Southampton Press's Person of the Year for the great effort and the great work that he did on the East End, working not just with Hampton Bays but school districts across the East End and dealing with the pandemic. And congratulations, Lars. And I've embarrassed you privately. Now I've embarrassed you publicly. So, but let me get to your question, which is, and it's good to distinguish between the state aid increases, under the foundation aid formula and the federal dollars, because the foundation aid increases, and, Hampton Bays and Riverhead, particularly in my district, were underfunded on foundation aid. Went to 60% last year, 80 this year, and finally fully funded, hopefully in the following year's budget next year. Those are recurring. Once those dollars are in the base, they're in there forever. And so those dollars will be recurring. They need to be contrasted with the federal dollars that came in the two COVID bills from Washington, which are the classic one-shot revenues. Don't get me wrong, very welcome to have those revenues. They have made the work, I think, of the state and our local school districts much easier by having those dollars, but they need to be distinguished. And, certainly I would urge that, one-shot revenue should be identified to be matched against one-shot expenditures, maybe capital needs and things of those nature, as opposed to using them for recurring expenditures where that cliff will occur. So I think that's the first thing. The second, to your question on unrestricted fund balances, yeah, I think that we, especially for smaller school districts on the east end of Long Island, 4% of those smaller budgets on smaller districts are not much of a cushion, for the rainy day that has happened to us and could happen in the future. So I do think we have to provide increased flexibility with unrestricted fund balances, as you say. I would say even absent the pandemic, we should be looking at that 4%. But certainly, given the current circumstances with the federal dollars, we need to have more flexibility on fund balances so that we have that kind of glide path, with the federal dollars over the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you, Senator Palumbo. I just want to remind everyone, we have about 7 questions left. So if we could limit it maybe to like a minute, minute and a half for each question with 4 responses, that would be perfect. Thank you. Senator Palumbo.
Thanks, Doc. And I'll be lean and mean. I just wanted to say hello again to Lars. Great to see you. And I think that's a great point. And that was Assemblyman Thiel mentioned it. One shot to one shot, right, is important. Remember, the governor, before all this federal money came in, was considering a 20% cut overall. And I think that would be really smart to raise the unrestricted level, because God forbid something like this hits again. Because remember those unexpected costs, PPE, going remote, more Chromebooks. You didn't have necessarily a slush fund to even handle that. So I think it certainly makes sense. And as Assemblyman Thiel mentioned, it really makes sense on the East End.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Malloy.
Okay, our next question is coming from Eastern Suffolk BOCES Sachem Senior, Juliana Lusaivero. Juliana? There she is. Juliana, you there? We can hear you. Okay, it looks like she is out. Okay, let me start with the question. We thank you for the tremendous support that you have provided to public schools over the years. That allows them to purchase services such as career and technical education for their students. The BOCES aid formula that reimburses school districts for the cost of career and technical education programs has not been adjusted in more than 30 years. Increasing the cap would provide additional aid to support BOCES CTE programs, which will be provided long-term benefits to students and the local economy, while at the same time making it more affordable for districts to send students to a BOCES technical program. The question is, will you commit to raising the aidable salary limit for boards of cooperative educational services, career and technical instructors to $60,000 over the next 3 years at $10,000 per year to increase the cap from the current level of $30,000? Okay, who would like to start off with answering that one? Okay, Assemblyman Smith.
So yes, I would be supportive of that. And I don't know if Juliana's with us, but as a Sachem graduate myself, happy to hopefully see her on here. And I was going to ask what she was studying. But yes, I would support that.
Okay, great. Senator White?
I would say yes, I would absolutely support that. I mean, they offer such great critical services to our students and we'd be lost without them. So I would 100% support that.
And Senator Matera?
As a BOCES alumni, I just want to say I'm very much in favor of BOCES, especially being in the trades. I'm the business agent with the Plumbers Union, 40 years as a member, went through the apprenticeship program with the Plumbers Local 200, a 5-year program. We need to make sure that the children that aren't going away to college and stuff like that, and they're already starting a career when they go to BOCES. So I am 110% in support of helping anything to do with BOCES. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, Assemblyman Durso.
Again, I'll echo the sentiments of Senator Matera. I am also a BOCES graduate from their carpentry program. Anything that we could do to give more aid to our BOCES programs, to retain, attract new instructors, great instructors in those programs is fantastic. Again, the BOCES program, I don't even think gets enough credit for what it can do for our young students, as far as giving them a trade, giving them an outlet and another option as far as it goes in their education, and not just in the trades, as far as nursing goes, criminal justice, becoming a law enforcement officer. They offer such great programs through the BOCES program. So anything I could do to help them going forward, I will be supporting.
Great. Juliana, just so you know, we did ask your question for you to keep things moving. I know you had a little technical difficulty there. So Assemblyman DeStefano, would you like to answer?
Yes, I was not a BOCES graduate, but I did work at BOCES in my first civil service job. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. Everybody has a unique talent. Some are academic, some are industrial, some are, hands-on kind of things, like Assemblyman Durso graduating with the carpentry degree. Yes, it makes perfect sense to give kids alternatives to academics, if that's the right way to put it. I'm not sure that's the correct enunciation, but I think that there's ways that you give kids opportunities that are not just history books and things of that nature. So I absolutely would support that.
Okay, great. All right, we're going to move on to our next question. Dr. Steichen.
Okay, thank you. This question comes from Longwood Central School District Senior Tyler Macian.
Hello. The education of students remains a critical aspect of a successful future. As you know, this is our commitment. In view of the unsettled and ever-changing political climate, how can all branches of government work collaboratively for a more stable environment for our schools, and what measures can be taken to get there?
Okay, who would like to take this one? Okay, Assemblyman Smith.
Thank you. And thank you, Tyler, for being here and asking that question. I think what we're doing today, and I wish you could experience this in person because it really is something to have hundreds of people come together. I think what we're doing today is important because, yeah, our politics have gotten hostile. And as I mentioned before, people are taking the opportunity to speak about any number of topics at their school board meetings. And so I think that, I've tried to reach out to my school districts over the course of the pandemic, and typically, but I do think having these ongoing dialogues are important because, I think we are all working to the same goal, and there's many ways to get there. And I think that's important. Thanks for your question.
Thank you. Assemblyman Durso.
Thank you, Tyler, for the question. Just quickly, I think the best way to do that and reach that goal is to take politics out of it. Schools are about educating our students in everything that goes on in the world. But making schools and I feel bad for you dealing with this political climate that's going on right now. But taking the politics out of it and remembering that we're here to educate the students and we're here to work for you, I think would be the best way to do that.
Thank you. Senator Matera.
Tyler, thank you so much for this question, because me as a newly elected official, this has been upsetting. You always want to be bipartisanship. You want to make sure that you work across the tables. And you know what? I just want our students to go to school and and have a career path. Worry about not the political end in a lot of ways, but for some reason, when I was growing up, you sat at the table and they always say, politics and religion, you make sure you don't start talking about that even with family. And I just want to make sure our students are going to school, and we got a lot going on. And direction right now, I'm just hoping that we could be bipartisanship with a lot of ways up in Albany and with the federal government too. But you know what? I really just want you guys to go to school, learn, and have your career path. And you know what? We're going to do whatever we have to do to work together with both sides of the aisle. But you know what? Go there and learn, my friend. Thank you.
Okay, and the last two answers will come from Assemblyman Thiel and Assemblyman Fitzpatrick. So Assemblyman Thiel, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Great question. I just wanted to make two remarks with regard to this. And, first, when it comes to education and it comes to Long Island, you've got elected officials of all political stripes on this call together today. And we don't always agree on everything, on every issue. But when it comes to education and when it comes to Long Island, we all work together. So this is one of those issues where, partisanship doesn't raise its ugly head like it does with some issues out there. We work for Long Island, we work for our school districts, and breakfasts like this are give us an opportunity to do that. And that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second is the relationship that between the executive and the legislature. And I've noticed a distinct change with regard to education there. typically we would be at this breakfast and regardless of political party, we would be ranting and raving about the cuts that the governor had made to the education budget, cuts to expense-driven aid, cuts to BOCES, all over the place that we would have to fight back for just to get back to square one to begin with. That's something that with this year's budget, we're not experiencing. Don't get me wrong, there are issues we still need to resolve. There'll be some things that we disagree with the governor about, but we are starting in a much better position because I think it's been a more collaborative effort this year. And probably tops on that list is foundation aid, where we're starting out with a $1.6 billion increase in foundation aid right off the bat. And that's a given, not something that we have to fight for with the executive. So, I think, there is some collaborative efforts going on, and, we all try to work together that are on this call. And I think we've been successful in trying to do that.
Okay, Assemblyman Fitzpatrick, last question.
Yes, thanks for your question, Tyler. Politics has always been a part of public education in New York State, and perhaps always will be. What we're experiencing now in this, what you call political climate, started with this implementation of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It has angered many parents across this island and around the state, and in fact around the country, because parents see what's going on. And they saw this with distance learning when they got a chance to see what their children were exposed to. Indoctrination happens when you have total control of an educational system by a very strong entity. In this state, it happens to be the State Teachers Union, which has outsized influence over curriculum and all education policy from K to 12. What we have to have is more balance between, parents need a voice. And by going to virtual Board of Education meetings, you are shutting out the parents in an attempt to hide from your constituents and the taxpayers. We don't have that luxury, Tyler, and boards of education, when you sign up and want to run for a Board of Education slot, you have to face the public just as any other elected official should. So parents want their children to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic and not be indoctrinated into the woke politics of CRT and transgender politics. What I'd like to see, when I listened to Dr. Lutz's presentation, it's very interesting, but I would like to see how well our schools are doing against, say, schools in China or India. We rank very low in internationally in math and science. We need to do a better job. So when I see a blue ribbon school, blue ribbon compared to what? I'd like to see what our blue ribbon schools look like compared to those in China, those in India, and those schools that fare better than we do in these international comparisons. So, parents want their voices heard. They don't want their children indoctrinated. They want their children to get the kind of education that they need to compete in today's world. And that means, how do we compare with the children of China and India and all of the countries that seem to be doing a better job than ours? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman Fitzpatrick. Mrs. Malloy.
Okay, we're moving on to the next question. I do see that Assemblywoman Giglio is on and she's been having some difficulty. So thank you, Assemblywoman, for being there. Okay, our next question is coming from the Middle Country School District, a student from Newfield High School senior, Dora John. Dora?
Good morning. Our question is one that has been asked over the past several years, and it's one that's even more important now. Will you support and assist school districts by relocating polling sites from elementary schools to more appropriate sites? Middle Country did see movement last year with the polling site in one of our elementary schools relocated to a middle school, and we are appreciative of that action. We remind you, though, that we, like several other school districts, still have elementary schools, including our pre-K and kindergarten centers, that are very secure on every school day, other than when they are used as polling sites. Using schools as voting sites limit security practices that are in place every other day that students are in attendance. Voters need not show identification. Election workers are not subjected to the same vetting as are other adults who spend full days in our schools. Voters and election workers don't have to adhere to the COVID protocols that are followed by students and staff. And parking, which is limited on the best of days in many of our schools, becomes even more problematic for staff and parents because space has to be reserved for voters and election workers. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to hearing your responses.
Okay, Assemblyman Smith.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Dora, and my friends and constituents and people that work together in the Middle Country School District, which I'll say has one of the most active and successful legislative committees working on these issues. I carry a bill in the Assembly, and I wholeheartedly agree that I think that schools should not be used as polling places. Now, I'll justify it by saying that they are, elementary schools are accessible buildings. They are within the communities, but there's actually nothing, and I've said this every year at these breakfasts, there's nothing in the state law requiring that a polling place be a public building. And what do I mean by that? One of the polling places in the town of Islip is the Bayshore Ford dealership. So I think that our Board of Elections across the state need to be a little bit more creative in finding polling locations. And, the Bayshore Ford, I don't know. I don't think they offer an election day special, but I don't know that somebody's going to be necessarily buying a car when they go to vote. So I don't think that's a bad place for a polling place. So, and I support the efforts of Middle Country. I think this is important. One caveat I will say, and it's something Middle Country worked with their local county legislators to have the polling site moved in one of these things. Something that the Board of Elections has said to me is they've countered when we've come in and said, let's move the polling places out of the schools. The Board of Elections, again, bipartisan, it's half Democrat, half Republican. They've countered and said, wait a second, school districts use their own buildings to conduct the school budget votes, and those budget votes take place on school days. So I would say that when we're looking to advocate for this, I think that we need to start first at home, and I would encourage every school board member to look and see, can we move the school budget vote out of the school district? That would give us a better position to then go to the County Board of Elections and say, we've done our part, move it to a library or something like that. So, and again, Middle Country, you've taken the lead on this, proud to represent you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I can only take one more because we are very behind and we still have several questions to go. I'm sorry about that. Senator White, you're the last one on this question.
I would just say this, I'm not opposed to moving the polling places, but I think, when we look statewide, we have to be careful because when we get into more rural areas, there are not a lot of options. So where there are options, and I would strongly advise boards of election to look for other options. Where there are other options, it would certainly be a better idea to move them out of schools, but where there are not, we need to recognize that schools are sometimes the only place where we can gather large groups of people in order to have good access for voting.
Okay, Dr. Steichen.
Okay, this next question comes from the Little Flower School District, Superintendent Dr. Harold Dean.
Good morning. Thank you to all the local legislators who were part of this breakfast. So my question, again, regarding impacts of COVID. So while the state has acknowledged many steps to assist districts in returning to as normal learning environments possible in our current climate, it's undeniable, based on your personal experiences and the experiences shared today, that COVID is schools from quarantines, staff shortages, forcing returns to remote instruction for periods of time, to ongoing student emotional traumas. Given these disruptions, acknowledged in part by the State Education Department's cancellation of the January Regents exams, has the legislature considered extending the APPR exemptions and flexibilities enacted the last few years to include the still uncertain remainder of the 2021-2022 school year?
Okay, who would like to take this? We'll limit this to 3 participants. Anyone?
Can you hear me?
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Assemblyman Engelbright.
Yes. So we're just beginning our committees as we are starting up the year. So the part of the question is to whether or not the legislature has already considered extending the APPR exemptions and flexibilities. I don't think we've had a chance to really get into a decision-making mode on this. I can only tell you, though, that I speak for myself and many of my colleagues who I've spoken with. I'll speak for myself. I would very much like to see the APPR exemptions and flexibilities extended. And we're still in a situation where there are great complexities of operation and normalcy within the operation of our schools. I think our teachers don't need the additional pressure of trying to deal with APPR rules and regulations that were being put into place by a different administration, by the way, prior to the pandemic. So I would very strongly favor, and as we go into the rest of the year, I'm going to speak strongly for continuing these exemptions and flexibilities and other constraints that I think would compromise education and information transfer.
Thank you. Senator White.
I would be in favor of giving some leniency here, because we've seen our students and our teachers thrown into a whole new world. It's not really fair to put regular standards up against them. So I would say, yeah, absolutely. Let's give them more time before we start bringing any of that back.
Thank you so much for your response. Mrs. Malloy.
Okay, so our next question comes from William Floyd School District, board member Angelo Casarino. Angelo? Okay. We see you.
On the video.
Okay, you're there.
Hey, how are you? Thank you from the William Floyd School District, Superintendent Costa and the Board of Education. My question is, which stakeholders are you committed to bringing in funding discussions to ensure that all districts are treated equally based upon their needs and not treated in a one-size-fits-all approach?
Okay, so who would like to start off? Okay, Assemblyman Thiel, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry.
I'm glad to answer, and welcome to my friends at William Floyd. It's good to see all of you today. And as was stated, we're at the position now where the foundation aid formula is finally going to be fully funded. And I note some of my districts, William Floyd among them, Riverhead, Hampton Bays, are very much helped. And Assemblyman DiStefano and I work together for William Floyd to try to make that happen. I think the question is are there going to be changes to the formula, or probably more important, what I hear is that it's not the formula so much, but all data that gets put into these formulas that need to be addressed. So listen, it's part of my routine every year when we're talking about school aid, to meet with all of my school districts. And William Floyd, we have our meeting every year with Joe and with Tony Palumbo and Alexis Wyke. I mean, we have that meeting with William Floyd. We're certainly committed to do it this year. We need to meet with all the stakeholders. We need to meet, it's my practice to meet with the school districts. I'll meet with NYSSBA. I'll meet with parents groups. I'm more than willing to talk about where we go in the future with state aid to education. And, really that's what this job is all about, is to try to reach consensus with people. We get to talk a lot today, but the most important part of our job is to listen. And, we'll be listening as to, what future steps we should be taking with the state aid formula.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Senator Palumbo.
Thanks, Vicki. And just real quick, there is a bill kicking around in the Senate. I think Daphne Jordan has it, to require SEG to study the sufficiency of the current formula. And I echo the sentiments of Assemblyman Thiel that, it's a bit of a tricky thing. Generally speaking, our poorest districts have been getting the most money and the wealthiest less, but obviously, there's always some tweaking and adjustments that could be helpful because each district has its own unique attributes, tax base, enrollment, and so forth, goals by the board. So it's certainly something I think that's a fluid thing that we're always considering.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, Senator Matera, please.
As a newly elected official, this is something amazing to me about the formula, how the formula works. Like in certain school districts, like this past year, I was so excited that, we got a good amount of money, especially we were very nervous about the budget. And, you commend certain people like Senator Schumer that made sure we got $12.6 billion that really helped us out with the budget, especially with the pandemic. So you know what, do I sit there and say how that formula works? I'm really trying to really understand it a lot more, but guess what? Every district needs, monies, no matter the poor or richer. We just need to make sure that that we all work together and make sure everybody gets their fair share. So that's something I'm going to look into more with this formula because I'm getting in the weeds with it. It's very, not understanding to me in a lot of ways. So that's something I'll be really, really looking into. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Dr. Stipem.
Okay, our last question before we wrap up the day comes from South Country School District Senior Ryan Christie.
I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My question is, what role should our legislators play in assisting school districts in making up for learning loss during the pandemic? And how can legislators ensure the support reaches students and their families equitably?
Okay, Assemblyman Durso.
Thanks, Ryan, for the question. I think the first step would be make sure we take steps to make sure that this doesn't happen again. If there is, God forbid, any type of pandemic in the future or any type of problem that arises to where there could be learning loss, that we've learned from this pandemic and make sure we take steps going forward it doesn't happen again. And as legislators, as far as making up for the learning loss now, I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we make everything available to teachers, students, parents, school districts, school board members, that we can try and do whatever we can do to catch up. It's incumbent upon us to make sure that those things happen. And really and I know part of your question is that the support reaches the students and our families. It's really our job to check in, to make sure that everybody's receiving the help that they do need, that the schools are receiving the funding that they do need, that we vote upon to make sure that they get, and to make sure that the resources are being spent wisely and reaching the people that it needs to reach. I think that's the most important thing, is being fiscally responsible with the money when it comes to these things and making up for the things that the students have lost over the past 2 years. It's our job to make sure that the money, the funding, and the help goes directly to the students that were affected and everything that we can do going forward to help them.
Thank you so much. I would like for everyone to get a chance to respond to this question, but briefly. So Assemblyman Smith.
Thank you so much. And thanks, Ryan, for your question. I think the pandemic has showed us with respect to learning loss, that something that I've been saying for years, that one of the greatest threats to our society and democracy is an uneducated public. And with this gap of learning, I think we're seeing the effects of that. So with respect to answer your question, I'm already looking and thinking, and I think we all should be thinking about not this budget year for education, but next budget year, because as soon as the federal funds came through that helped provide assistance for this school year or next school year, that's great, but that's a one-shot deal. So I am deeply concerned. I think, not to raise the alarm, but I am very concerned that once this federal funding runs out, that we are, we're funding things that should be funded, universal pre-K and things to the like, but I want to make sure we have funding going forward so we don't have to cut these programs, but also want to make sure that we're not creating new recurring expenditures that we can't keep up with in the future. I think that's something that's deeply concerning because as great as this year is for funding and last year, wouldn't it be devastating if we joined next year and the house was on fire and we had to start, dumping things? So thank you again, Ryan, for your question. And thank you, Longwood, for hosting us.
Okay, Assemblyman Engelbright.
So the responsibility that we have is basically to make sure that the financial resources are there for the professionals in our public school system to do their job. We're going to certainly work very hard to make sure that that happens in this budget. We need to make sure that it continues, that the money is there to maintain the high quality of education that our Long Island school districts have become well known for. That's our job. It is not our job to try to determine what the specific modality of information transfer is supposed to be. I would just like to make sure that our teachers and our administrators are supported and that the school districts and school administrations have funding sufficient to meet the challenge of trying to catch up.
Okay, thank you. Assemblywoman Giglio.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, having some technical difficulties with this ice storm that we had last night, but I'm happy to be here and I have been listening for quite some time. So we have been in constant communication with your superintendents and with your school boards and with your principals of your schools, and they are telling us the challenges that you've all faced. And we know what they are. We need to provide better opportunities for you, both in school and out of school, preparing for your future careers, whichever they may be that you choose. And the extra curriculum that you might need, we are going to fight to get that funding so that your teachers can educate you for the loss that you had this past year during the pandemic, which was difficult for every school. So it's our job as legislators to make sure that you get the education that you need, not only to be able to live on Long Island. I mean, we love our students. The state spends a lot of money educating you, and it's very important that we make sure your education is complete and that we have jobs for you to fill once your education is complete. So we will continue working on it, and whatever your superintendents, your principals, your school board members, your teachers say that they need for you, you can be sure that we'll be there fighting to get it for you so that you have a complete education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Matero.
This is a very great question, Ryan. I appreciate it. I've been attending a lot of the roundtables, and I was very vocal and very active, making sure that our children are back to school. I said it before, with make sure they're with our educators and have an interaction with the fellow students. We need to make sure that the funding is always available for our sports, our bands, our theaters, any club activities. We need our children to be active, and you know what, not to be sitting home, virtual. That's so important. Yes, this was unprecedented times for all of us and everything like that, but you know what, we're better. We know what we need to do. We're safer, and you know what, our children need to get back to doing what they do best, and that's being in school and being, with their educators and being active with their fellow students. So I will be always there to make sure that we get funding for all these extra fundings available for these extra activities. Thank you for having us today. It's very, very important. I look forward to working with all my districts, and I really appreciate the time.
Thank you. Anyone else like to respond?
I'm sorry, I had my hand up.
Okay, didn't see it. Go ahead, Senator White.
That's okay. Thank you so much. I mean, I've been really outspoken about making sure that we're dealing with learning loss. I think the number one thing is to make sure that we keep students in school and support initiatives that will have things like summer programs and after school programs to make sure that we can make up for the time that was lost with our in-person teaching, because the Zoom learning was a great effort, but and I think all of our students really suffered from that. And so anything that we can do to support in-person learning, I'm going to support those initiatives 100%.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Okay, with that said, we're going to wrap up today. As we close our 18th annual regional workshop, I would like to take this time to thank the Eastern Suffolk BOCES and Suffolk Regional PTA, Julie Lutz for her meaningful work in education that has spanned decades and will be missed by so many. To the students and district colleagues that participated today, thank you for taking the time to discuss many important issues with our legislators. The partnerships that have been formed give our legislators an opportunity to advocate for all of our districts. I appreciate all of the legislators for attending today and having engaging, relevant, and meaningful discussions that mean so much to our districts, students, and our communities. I would also like to recognize my fellow board members who attended today and thank the Legislative Committee Chair, Mr. Daniel Tomaszewski, and Ms. Victoria Malloy for their continued and important work with students throughout this community. Pam Donovan, this event would not be as successful if it were not for you, my friend. Your tireless work organizing this event each year is extraordinary, and you are truly one of Longwood's best. And to Dr. Lohman, thank you for always putting the needs of kids and our community first. You are truly the meaning of Longwood's pride, spirit, and heart. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and we will see you next year, hopefully in person, for the 19th Annual Legislative Workshop. Bye.